What happens when true love is challenged by the pain of impossibility? Diana, a 24-year-old young artist, finds herself in an emotional whirlwind that leads her to question everything she believed about happiness and fulfillment. Amidst a lush forest in Germany, she meets Arthur, a charismatic and ambitious man, and soon the two embark on an intense romance that quickly evolves into marriage. However, the joy that seemed promising soon transforms into a battlefield of emotions when the inability to conceive children becomes an unbearable burden, threatening the foundation of their relationship. Diana grapples with the weight of family expectations and the social pressure surrounding her, struggling to reconcile her dreams of motherhood with the harsh reality she faces. At the same time, Arthur confronts moral dilemmas at work, where temptations present themselves at every corner, creating a growing chasm between him and Diana. With each challenge, the young artist seeks a way to rediscover herself, using art as her form of expression and escape. As tensions rise and separation becomes a real possibility, Diana must confront her deepest fears and discover if she is still capable of dreaming in a world that seems to be crumbling around her. Diana has always been passionate about art. Since she was little, she sought refuge in her paintings, where each brushstroke represented a small part of her soul. In her studio, surrounded by blank canvases and colorful paints, she felt free. However, the pressure surrounding her was now becoming unbearable. In moments of solitude, she wondered if the dream of being a mother could be fulfilled in another way, or if the life she had always wanted was destined for emptiness. As she struggled against the tide of emotions, Diana also dealt with the constant presence of her family, who pressured her to create a home and a family. Her conversations with her mother were always filled with subtleties that made clear the family's desire for grandchildren. These interactions made her feel increasingly inadequate, as if she were failing in her role as a woman and daughter. Her mother's worried gaze, full of hope and expectation, tormented her, creating an extra weight on her heart. Arthur, on the other hand, was navigating a world of ambition and success. He was an attractive man who knew how to use his charm to his advantage. However, this same ambition led him to a moral dilemma. As he strove to achieve success in his career, he found himself surrounded by temptations that pulled him away from Diana. The nights he should have been by her side were often replaced by work commitments, causing him to emotionally distance himself. Arthur wondered if what he was sacrificing was worth it, and if, in his pursuit of success, he was losing what truly mattered. The interactions between Diana and Arthur were intense, but the lack of communication soon began to create a chasm between them. In a moment of despair, Diana decided to open up to Arthur about her insecurities and fears. During one of their conversations, she asked him if he still loved her, even though she couldn't give him what he desired. The words echoed in the room, and Arthur, taking her hand, replied sincerely that he loved her, but the pressure was consuming them. This moment of vulnerability made them reflect on what they truly valued in their relationship. As time passed, art became Diana's refuge. She began to paint not only her emotions but also her dreams. Each canvas became a way to express the pain of separation, doubt, and hope. She wondered if she could find a way to rediscover herself, not just as an artist, but as a woman. In her works, she sought answers that often seemed distant. As Diana struggled to balance her dreams and reality, she realized she needed to seek help and support. In an unexpected meeting at an art gallery, she met an older artist who inspired her to look within herself. This new friendship brought light amid the darkness, and the more experienced artist encouraged her to explore her emotions through painting, helping her see her pain as an important part of her journey. Thus, amid a backdrop of uncertainties and conflicts, Diana began to understand that true love is not defined solely by children or achievements, but by the ability to face together the challenges that life imposes. Her story with Arthur would reveal whether love could truly flourish amid adversity, as they sought a new understanding of what it means to be happy and fulfilled. Diana found herself in an emotional maze where each path seemed to lead to more doubts and uncertainties. Sleepless nights became routine, and the frustration with her inability to conceive children enveloped her like a heavy cloak. Amid this, her interactions with Arthur became increasingly difficult. His absence at home, immersed in seemingly endless commitments, intensified her sense of helplessness. Every time she waited for him to have dinner, anticipation mixed with growing anxiety. When he finally arrived, exhausted and distracted, Diana felt as if the love that once was a source of strength had now become a burden. The pressure from her family, especially from her mother, did not help. The visits became more frequent, and each conversation felt like a new reminder that time was passing and life was not waiting. "When are you going to give me grandchildren, Diana?" her mother would ask, with a smile that barely concealed her concern. For every evasive answer that Diana tried to give, a sad look responded. She knew her mother just wanted to see her happy, but the constant comparison with other women in the family, who were already mothers, made her feel inadequate. In a moment of despair, Diana decided to seek relief in art. She locked herself in her studio, surrounded by paints and blank canvases, and began to paint. The brushstrokes became her way of expressing the pain that suffocated her heart. Each painting, an explosion of colors and feelings, each stroke, a silent scream of anguish. But instead of finding relief, she realized that art also brought her insecurities to the surface. Looking at her paintings, she questioned whether she was still capable of creating something beautiful in a world that seemed to be falling apart. It was during one of her visits to an art gallery that she met Clara, an older artist who became a light amidst her turmoil. Clara was a woman of striking presence, with grey hair and eyes that seemed to see beyond appearances. She approached Diana while observing one of her works. "You pour your soul into each brushstroke, but it seems you are struggling against something bigger, aren't you?" commented Clara with empathy. This simple question made Diana open up, and for the first time she spoke about her insecurities, her fears, and the pressure she felt to be a mother. Clara listened attentively. "Pain is part of the creative process, dear. Don't be afraid to explore your emotions. They can guide you to a place of understanding." These words echoed in Diana's mind as she began to realize that her pain could be a source of inspiration, not just a burden to carry. However, even with Clara's support, doubt persisted. What if I never get over this? What if my love for Arthur isn't enough? She thought, reflecting on how the pressure from the outside world affected her self-image. Arthur, in turn, was also facing his own demons. He found himself caught between the pursuit of professional success and the desire to be present for Diana. The temptations at work were constant, and he felt increasingly guilty for being away from home. Diana's sad gaze when he didn't show up for dinner haunted him. One night, when he finally decided to leave work early, he found Diana sitting in her studio, surrounded by canvases. The smell of fresh paint hung in the air, but her expression was one of despair. "You don't understand, Arthur. It's like every day that passes, the distance between us grows," she said, her voice trembling. "I love you, Diana, but I need to ensure our future. The pressure is intense, and I feel like I'm failing at everything," Arthur replied, frustration evident in his tone. The conversation turned into a heated argument, where words cut like knives. Do you think success compensates for how much you're missed here? That money can replace what really matters? Diana questioned, her voice shaking with emotion. Arthur fell silent, realizing that the truth was right there before him, but his ambition kept him blind. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between them only grew. Diana felt increasingly alone, even when she was next to Arthur. She sought solace in her paintings, but the pain of reality seeped into every canvas. Her friendship with Clara deepened, and Diana began participating in smaller exhibitions where each piece was a representation of her emotional journey. Conversations with Clara became a safe space to explore her feelings, but still, she wondered if she could truly find herself again. The truth was that Diana still didn't know how to deal with the possibility of not being a mother. Doubts tormented her in moments of solitude, and she questioned whether she could be happy without the life she had always wanted. What remains when you can't have what you love most? She pondered as she looked out the window, lost in thought. And even with Clara's support and art as a refuge, Diana's internal battle intensified. The love that once was a source of strength now became a painful reminder of everything that could have been. Meanwhile, Arthur found himself increasingly torn between the pressure of work and the need to be present for Diana. Sleepless nights and professional commitments isolated him, and he didn't know how to reconnect with the woman he loved. In moments of reflection, he began to realize that professional success might not be what truly brought him happiness. Conversations with Diana echoed in his mind, and he questioned whether he was really willing to sacrifice love for status and money. Diana and Arthur were at a critical point where true love was tested by seemingly insurmountable challenges. Both needed to confront their own limitations and vulnerabilities, but the doubt about what truly mattered in their lives remained. Diana's art and Arthur's ambition became mirrors reflecting their internal struggles, and the question that lingered in the air was, would they find a way to unite again, or would the love that once brought them together become just a distant memory? Diana felt as though she were in a labyrinth, but now the walls seemed to close in even more with each passing day. The pressure to be a mother came not only from her mother but also from her friends, who shared photos of their children and family moments on social media. As she scrolled through her feed, the pain in her chest intensified, as if each click were a stab to her hopes. She knew she needed time for herself, but the feeling of guilt consumed her. "Why can't I be happy for them?" she questioned, as tears streamed down her face. Her conversation with Clara, although comforting, hadn't resolved all her insecurities. Clara had gone through a similar journey and always said that pain was a path to self-discovery. But Diana felt that her path was filled with stones. What the older artist didn't know was that with each canvas Diana painted, she felt more distant from herself. The vibrant colors that once represented her now seemed dull, as if her emotions had lost their life. Meanwhile, Arthur found himself in his own prison. Work consumed him, and in every meeting, in every negotiation, he thought of Diana. But ambition was a monster that wouldn't leave him in peace. He remembered how he had promised himself that he would never let work interfere with his relationship, but now he felt trapped in a snare of his own making. The messages from Diana asking if he would come home were like constant reminders of his absence. He didn't want to be a terrible husband, but the demands of his career seemed to disregard his intentions. One night, as Diana gazed at a painting depicting an image of a happy family, she felt something inside her break. Loneliness enveloped her, and the art that should have been a relief became a mirror of her frustrations. "Why can't I be like them?" she whispered to herself, her voice choked. The studio was a refuge, but also a place of confrontation. The shadow of doubt followed her, and when she tried to concentrate, it was as if a storm formed in her mind. Arthur, for his part, faced a dilemma at work. A new project had emerged, a big contract that could elevate his career to a new level, but he knew it would mean more hours away from home. In a meeting, his colleagues encouraged him to accept, saying it was a rare opportunity. He felt tempted, but the memory of Diana's sad gaze haunted him. What if I lose all of this? He thought. The image of her, alone at home, tormented him every second. Days turned into weeks and an unexpected event arose. Diana was invited to an art exhibition where she would have the opportunity to showcase her work to the public. This could be a new beginning, a chance to reconnect with her passion. However, anxiety took hold of her. What if no one likes it? What if I fail? She questioned, consumed by the fear of judgment. With Clara's support, she decided she needed to prepare, but the stress led her to an emotional collapse on the eve of the exhibition. Arthur, noticing that the situation was worsening, decided he needed to do something. He got home early, determined to help Diana prepare. However, upon finding her in tears in the studio, he didn't know how to act. "What's happening, Diana?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "I can't do this, Arthur. I'm so far from who I used to be," she replied, the pain in her eyes tightening his heart. The conversation quickly turned into an argument. Diana spoke about her insecurities, and Arthur expressed his frustration at not being able to be the support she needed. "You don't understand. I'm struggling here, trying to find myself, while you seem so distant," she yelled, her voice echoing off the studio walls. Arthur felt as if ice was forming between them. "I'm here, Diana. I just don't know how to help you," he replied, feeling powerless. In that moment of tension, the truth they both had been avoiding revealed itself. They were dealing with their own battles but couldn't communicate. Diana wanted Arthur to be present, not just physically, but emotionally. And Arthur wanted Diana to know that he loved her, even if his actions didn't show it. But the emotional distance between them felt insurmountable. After the argument, Diana decided she needed some time alone. She pulled away, seeking refuge in her art, while Arthur found himself lost in a sea of guilt and indecision. The exhibition was approaching, and he wondered whether he should go or if it would only exacerbate the situation. Doubt consumed him, and the ambition that had once driven him now left him paralyzed. In the days that followed, Diana immersed herself in her art, but the pain of her journey and Arthur's frustrations haunted her. She began to realize she needed to face her insecurities head-on. During one of her conversations with Clara, she vented, "I feel like I'm losing myself, as if there's no more space for who I really am." Clara encouraged her to use that pain in her art, transforming it into something that spoke of struggle and resilience. Arthur, on his side, began to realize he needed to make changes. Ambition wasn't enough if it meant losing what he loved most. He decided he would go to the exhibition, not just as a spectator, but as support for Diana. He wanted to show her that he was willing to fight for them, even if it meant confronting his own fears. On the night of the exhibition, Diana was nervous, but upon seeing Arthur in the crowd, a small thread of hope emerged. He was there, and that meant there was still a chance for reconnection. When she presented herself, the vulnerability in her voice touched the audience. The paintings that expressed her pain and longings were received with empathy, and the connection she hoped for began to blossom. At the end of the night, as the crowd dispersed, Arthur approached Diana, his eyes filled with love and understanding. "I'm here, Diana. I always will be. Let's face this together," he said. with a smile that seemed to illuminate the darkness surrounding them. Diana felt a wave of relief and gratitude, and for the first time in a long time, she realized that perhaps together they could find a way back to each other. But in her heart, the struggle was not yet over. The journey was just beginning. That night, Diana's studio was filled with a mix of nervousness and expectation. The walls, adorned with her works, seemed to vibrate with the accumulated energy. Each brush stroke she had made reflected not only her art, but also her internal struggles. The event, which was supposed to be a moment of celebration, had turned into a battleground where her insecurities confronted her hopes. As she prepared, her hands trembled slightly, and the mirror in front of her reflected a woman caught between fear and determination. When she finally stepped onto the stage, the room full of unfamiliar faces watched her. Diana's heart raced, and for a moment, the world around her seemed to fade away. She took a deep breath, trying to find the voice that had been lost among tears and frustrations. "My name is Diana," she began, her voice trembling. "These paintings are pieces of me, pieces I have been trying to understand." As she spoke, the words began to flow, and each sentence became a catharsis of her soul. That room, which had once seemed intimidating, now became a safe space where she could be authentic. Arthur, in the back, watched everything with a mix of admiration and pain. He knew the depth of Diana's struggle, but never imagined she could expose herself so completely in front of strangers. Seeing the passion in her voice and the sincerity in her eyes, he realized she was not just fighting against her insecurities, she was breaking free from them. For him, that moment was a turning point. He understood that while he focused on his work, he had set aside the essence of what really mattered: human connection. When Diana finished speaking, a wave of applause echoed in the room. The sound enveloped her like a warm embrace, and she smiled, feeling lighter than she had in months. But at the same time, a shadow of doubt still lingered over her. What if this wasn't enough, she thought. What if, even so, I didn't find what I was really looking for? The voices of her mother and friends seemed to resonate in her mind, amplifying her insecurities. Arthur approached, his heart heavy with the urgency to reconnect. "Diana," he said, his voice gentle. "You were amazing. Your art is powerful. You don't need to feel this way." But Diana looked at him, her eyes misty. "I don't know if I can be the person everyone expects me to be," she replied. "I'm so tired of trying to be someone I'm not." The truth in her words hit Arthur like an arrow. He realized that in his own quest for success, he had pushed Diana in directions she never wanted to go. In that moment, the connection between them felt fragile, but also full of possibilities. Arthur began to reflect on his own choices and what it really meant to be successful. He remembered his own dreams, which had often been overshadowed by the pressure to meet professional goals. Now more than ever, he wanted Diana to know she was not alone in this journey. "Let's figure this out together," he said, holding her hand. "It doesn't matter what people think. What matters is what we want." Diana felt a warmth grow inside her, a spark of hope. The idea that they could face challenges side by side felt like a light at the end of the tunnel. But at the same time, a deep fear consumed her. What if things didn't change? What if, even with all of Arthur's support, she still felt lost? The event ended, and as people began to disperse, Diana and Arthur stepped away from the crowd. They found a quiet corner, away from curious gazes. "I want to be someone who feels good about herself, who is not afraid to be who she is," Diana said, her voice firm, though her eyes were still filled with uncertainty. Arthur nodded, Knowing that this was a journey that would require time and patience, Diana realized that art was not only a reflection of her pain, but also a form of healing. With Arthur's support, she decided she would continue to explore her emotions through painting, but would also allow herself to experience life more authentically. "I will give myself permission to fail," she thought, feeling for the first time as if she were on the right path. That night became a milestone in their lives. They both committed to not only facing their insecurities, but also to supporting each other in the journey of self-discovery. Diana began to see that true success was not about meeting others' expectations, but about finding joy and purpose in her own life. And as they walked out of the studio together, a new determination arose within them. They were ready to write a new chapter, a chapter that would be written with honesty, vulnerability, and above all, love. The next morning, Diana woke up with a strange feeling. The event still echoed in her mind, but now there was a new layer of emotion. She felt light, but at the same time, a wave of doubts washed over her. What if all of this was just an illusion? She thought as she looked out the window. The sun was shining, but her mind was shrouded in clouds. Arthur had supported her, but what would happen when the initial euphoria faded? Diana remembered her insecurities and the moments when she felt inadequate. The memories were like shadows that seemed to dance around her, always ready to inspire fear. She got out of bed and, in a burst of inspiration, decided it was time to put her feelings into art again. In the weeks that followed, Diana devoted herself to her paintings as a way to explore her emotions. Each canvas became a mirror of her internal struggles, but also of her small victories. She began to paint what she felt in that moment: joy, pain, hope. But doubts persisted. As color took shape, the critical voice inside her whispered, "This isn't enough. You're not good enough." Arthur noticed the change in Diana. He watched her work, but he felt there was something more at stake. He knew she was still battling her insecurities. One day, while they were together in the studio, he decided to bring it up. "Diana, I see the light in you, but I also realize you still feel trapped," he said hesitantly. She paused for a moment, looking at him with eyes filled with emotions. "I thought that by exposing myself, everything would change, that I would feel stronger. But I still feel like I'm not enough," she confessed. Arthur moved closer, holding her hand. "You're fighting an internal battle. It's not just about the art, but about who you are. And that takes time." Those words touched Diana deeply. She knew she was in a process of transformation, but the path still seemed long and difficult. Over the days, Diana allowed herself moments of introspection. She began to question her past and the choices that had brought her to this point. The pressures she felt, both from outside and within, began to take on new meaning. The desire to please others and meet expectations had distanced her from herself. "I don't want this anymore," she thought, as she looked out through the foggy windows of her studio. During a conversation with a longtime friend, Mariana, Diana started to open her heart. "Mariana, I don't know how to deal with this. Sometimes I feel like I'm in a hole and can't get out," she vented. Mariana listened attentively. "Diana, we all go through moments like this. One night, while working on a new painting, Diana encountered what seemed to be a creative block. Her hands trembled, and a feeling of frustration took over her. What if I can't do this? What if I fail again? The insecurities bubbled to the surface, bringing her to a point of despair. Arthur entered the studio and, seeing Diana's anguished expression, approached her. "What's going on?" he asked, concerned. "I feel like I'm failing. You need to remember who you really are, not what others expect you to be." Those words resonated in Diana like a calling. Arthur's support and the conversation with Mariana made her reflect on the importance of being true to herself. She realized that she had the power to define her own path, even if it meant facing her flaws and fears head-on. However, the idea of starting over still terrified her. What if I'm not able to overcome this? What if I disappoint myself? Diana said, her voice choked. Arthur gently replied, "Failing is part of the process. It doesn't mean you're not good enough. You're surpassing yourself every day. And I'll be here no matter what happens." Those words brought temporary relief, but the doubts remained. Diana realized that her internal struggle was something she also needed to face alone. On a night of reflection, she sat at the table with papers and pens around her. She began to write about her fears, her aspirations, and her failures. "If I fail, let it be my failure. I want to be myself, regardless of the outcomes," she wrote, with tears streaming down her face. This exercise in self-awareness brought new clarity. Diana began to understand that the pursuit of success should not be a measure of her identity. She was more than her achievements or failures. The art, which had once been a means of validation, began to transform into a space of freedom. Meanwhile, Arthur faced his own struggles. He realized that he had placed his professional ambitions above everything, including his connection with Diana. The pressure to succeed had distanced him from what truly mattered: love and friendship. He began to wonder if he was ready to change his own definition of success. Diana and Arthur supported each other in a cycle of discovery and growth. Their friendship became stronger, but also more challenging. One night, while discussing the future, Diana expressed her fears about what could happen if something went wrong. "What if I can't hold on? What if I fail again?" Arthur held her hand, looking into her eyes. "We're not alone in this. We'll face it together." Arthur's response made her feel stronger, but the internal battle was still not over. Diana realized that the journey of self-discovery was filled with ups and downs. There were days when she felt confident, and others when doubt overwhelmed her. But with each brushstroke and each conversation, she was learning to accept uncertainty. As time passed, Diana began to see the beauty in imperfections, both in her art and in her life. Arthur's support and conversations with friends helped her understand that each failure was an opportunity for growth. And although the journey was long, she was determined to continue. The next morning, Diana woke up with a strange feeling. The event still echoed in her mind, but now there was a new layer of emotion. She felt light, but at the same time, a wave of doubts washed over her. What if all of this was just an illusion? She thought as she looked out the window. The sun was shining, but her mind was shrouded in clouds. Diana knew that true strength came from within, and that the key to her freedom was accepting who she truly was with all her complexities. The love and friendship she shared with Arthur were not just a support, but also an invitation to become the best version of herself. Thus, as she looked at her paintings, she remembered that every mistake, every success, and every emotion was part of the larger picture of her life. And, finally, that was enough. Arthur had supported her. But what would happen when the initial euphoria faded? Diana remembered her insecurities and the moments when she felt inadequate. The memories were like shadows that seemed to dance around her, always ready to inspire fear. She got out of bed and, on impulse, decided it was time to put her feelings into art again. In the weeks that followed, Diana dedicated herself to her paintings as a way to explore her emotions. Each canvas became a mirror of her internal struggles, but also of her small victories. She began to paint what she felt in that moment: joy, pain, hope. But the doubts persisted. As the color took shape, the critical voice inside her whispered, "This isn't enough. You're not good enough." Arthur noticed the change in Diana. He watched her work, but he felt that something more was at stake. He knew she was still battling her insecurities. One day, while they were together in the studio, he decided to bring it up. "Diana, I see the light in you, but I also notice you still feel trapped," he said hesitantly. She paused for a moment, looking at him with eyes full of emotion. "I thought that by exposing myself, everything would change, that I would feel stronger. But I still feel like I'm not enough," she confessed. Arthur moved closer, holding her hand. "You're fighting an internal battle. It's not just about the art, it's about who you are. And that takes time." Those words touched Diana deeply. She knew she was in a process of transformation, but the path still seemed long and difficult. Over the days, Diana allowed herself moments of introspection. She began to question her past and the choices that had brought her here. The pressures she felt, both from outside and within, began to take on new meaning. The desire to please others and meet expectations had pulled her away from herself. "I don't want this anymore," she thought, as she looked out the foggy windows of her studio. During a conversation with a longtime friend, Mariana, Diana began to open her heart. "Mariana, I don't know how to deal with this. Sometimes I feel like I'm in a hole and can't get out," she vented. Mariana listened attentively. "Diana, we all go through moments like this. You need to remember who you really are, not what others expect you to be." Those words resonated with Diana like a call. Arthur's support and the conversation with Mariana made her reflect on the importance of being true to herself. She realized she had the power to define her own path, even if it meant facing her flaws and fears head-on. However, the idea of starting over still terrified her. One night, while working on a new painting, Diana faced what seemed to be a creative block. Her hands trembled, and a feeling of frustration overwhelmed her. "What if I can't do this? What if I fail again?" The insecurities came to the surface, leading her to a point of despair. Arthur entered the studio and, seeing Diana's anguished expression, approached her. "What's going on?" he asked, concerned. "I feel like I'm failing. What if I can't get past this? What if I disappoint you, disappoint myself?" Diana said, her voice choked. Arthur gently replied, "Failing is part of the process. It doesn't mean you're not good enough. You're overcoming yourself every day. And I will be here no matter what happens." Those words brought temporary relief, but the doubts remained. Diana realized that her internal struggle was something she also needed to face alone. On a night of reflection, she sat at the table with papers and pens around her. She began to write about her fears, her aspirations, and her failures. "If I fail, let it be my failure. I want to be myself, regardless of the outcomes," she wrote, tears streaming down her face. This exercise in self-awareness brought a new clarity. Diana began to understand that the pursuit of success shouldn't be a measure of her identity. She was more than her achievements or failures. The art, which had once been a means of validation, began to transform into a space of freedom. Each brushstroke became a form of liberation, a silent scream of who she wanted to become. Meanwhile, Arthur faced his own struggles. He realized he had placed his professional ambitions above everything, including his connection with Diana. The pressure to succeed had pulled him away from what truly mattered: love and friendship. He began to wonder if he was ready to change his own definition of success. Diana and Arthur supported each other in a cycle of discovery and growth. Their friendship grew stronger, but also more challenging. One night, As they talked about the future, Diana expressed her fears about what might happen if something went wrong. What if I can't hold my ground? What if I fail again? Arthur took her hand, looking into her eyes. We're not alone in this. We'll face it together. Arthur's response made her feel stronger, but the internal battle was still not over. Diana realized that the journey of self-discovery was full of ups and downs. There were days when she felt confident, and others when doubt took over. But with each brushstroke and every conversation, she was learning to embrace uncertainty. Over time, Diana began to see the beauty in imperfections, both in her art and in her life. Arthur's support and conversations with friends helped her understand that each failure was an opportunity for growth. And although the journey was long, she was determined to continue. Diana knew that true strength came from within and that the key to her freedom was accepting who she really was, with all her complexities. The love and friendship she shared with Arthur were not just support, but also an invitation to become the best version of herself. Thus, as she looked at her paintings, she remembered that every mistake, every success, and every emotion was part of the larger picture of her life. And ultimately, that was enough. That day, the sun shone brightly, but the light could not penetrate the dark clouds forming in Diana's mind. She was a bit more nervous than usual. The date of her first solo exhibition was approaching quickly, and although she had worked hard on her paintings, a wave of insecurity washed over her. She felt as if she was standing on the edge of a cliff, about to take a step that could change her life forever. Arthur had become her biggest supporter, but even so, Diana couldn't shake the feeling that her art wasn't good enough. The idea of exposing herself, of showing the world her creations, was both exciting and terrifying. The memory of her past failures haunted her mind, like an echo of critical voices that never seemed to quiet down. What if no one likes it? She thought, her heart racing. What if I fail again? That morning, as she reviewed the final brushstrokes on her painting, a thought hit her hard. What happens if I can't hold on? Insecurity took over, and in a wave of despair, she sat on the studio floor, her eyes fixed on the canvas in front of her. She felt as if the weight of the world were on her shoulders. Arthur entered the space, his concerned gaze falling on Diana in such a vulnerable moment. "Diana, what happened?" he asked, moving closer to her. The gentle tone of his voice brought some comfort, but the storm inside her did not calm. "I don't know if I can do this," she replied, her voice choked. "The fear of failing is consuming me. What if I disappoint everyone, including myself?" Arthur knelt beside her, holding her hand. "You are not alone. We all face fears, and failing is part of the process. What matters is how you rise afterward." His words were a balm, but still, Diana felt lost. What he said was true, but the internal battle was intense. She wanted to believe, but the voices of doubt wouldn't quiet down. As they talked, Diana began to reflect on her journey up to that point. From her first attempts at painting to the endless sessions in which she felt paralyzed, each experience had shaped her. She remembered the times she let herself be swayed by others' opinions, sacrificing her own voice. Why did I let myself be influenced by those voices, she thought, frustration growing. Why didn't I trust myself? A wave of emotion washed over her, and tears began to slip down her face. What if I don't know how to move forward? What if I can't handle what comes next? Arthur, sensing the depth of her despair, decided to be more direct. Sometimes life requires us to make tough choices. You can choose to hide behind fear or take a step forward and allow yourself to shine. Those words hit her like lightning. Diana felt a mix of anger and determination. How could she allow fear to control her life? What she truly wanted was to break free, not just from others' pressures, but from her own internal shackles. "I don't want to live like this anymore," she decided, her voice now firm. "I want to be myself, no matter what happens." With a new determination pulsing in her heart, Diana stood up. She looked at the canvas that challenged her, and her vision of her art began to change. Instead of seeing only failures, she started to notice the beauty in imperfections. Each brushstroke represented a part of her journey, an expression of who she was. Rather than fearing others' gazes, she decided she wanted people to see the truth behind her art. "I can't control others' opinions, but I can control what I put on this canvas," she thought, feeling a wave of liberation. With a new purpose, she picked up the brushes and began to work again. Each movement was an act of resistance against her insecurities, an act of self-love she didn't know she needed. Arthur watched amazed as Diana immersed herself in her painting with renewed passion. He realized that her transformation was not only artistic, but deeply personal. The tension in the air began to dissipate and the light emanating from her was contagious. "This is amazing," he commented, his voice full of admiration. "You are finding yourself again." Diana smiled, feeling the positive energy flowing between them. "I'm learning to accept who I am with all my flaws and imperfections." Her response echoed like a mantra, and in that moment, something inside her broke. The liberation from the shackles of fear made her feel lighter, more alive. The night of the exhibition finally arrived. The studio was filled with people, and Diana's heart raced with anxiety. However, as she looked at the paintings, she felt a wave of pride. Each piece represented a part of her journey, and regardless of the audience's reaction, she knew she had surpassed herself. Looking at Arthur, who stood by her side with a supportive smile on his face, she felt she was not alone. As people began to approach, admiring her works, Diana realized that true victory was not in others' approval, but in the freedom she had found within herself. She had faced her fears, challenged her insecurities, and allowed herself to be vulnerable. And that night, more than any compliment, she felt that she had finally become who she was truly meant to be. On that night of exposure, Diana felt a mix of nervousness and anticipation. The studio was filled with people, each with their own stories and experiences, but now she no longer saw that space as a battlefield. It was a place of celebration, a stage where her art could finally shine. As she watched people approach her paintings, a new feeling began to blossom within her: confidence. She remembered Arthur's words echoing in her mind, "You are not alone." And indeed, she wasn't. His support was an anchor that kept her steady even in the storm of emotions. Every compliment she received, every expression of admiration, made her heart pulse with gratitude. But the true victory was not in the applause, but in the transformation that had occurred within her. At the end of the night, as the studio lights began to dim and people dispersed, Diana sat in a corner, reflecting on everything she had been through. She remembered the hours spent alone in the studio, the doubts that had plagued her, and the tears that had fallen. The path had not been easy, but each step had brought her to this moment. "I have overcome my limitations," she thought, a shy smile appearing on her face. The idea that her past failures would no longer define her freed her from a heavy burden. Arthur approached, bringing with him the comforting energy that had always enveloped her. "You were amazing, Diana. Your paintings are beautiful." He sat down beside her, and she could feel the warmth of the support she had always needed. "Thank you, not just for the words, but for being by my side all this time." The gratitude she felt for him was immense. He not only believed in her, but helped her believe in herself. "You are different," Arthur said, watching her closely. "More confident, more—" "You?" Diana looked at the canvas that now bore the marks of her effort and creativity. "I realized that I can't let fear paralyze me. Life is full of risks, and I was so focused on my flaws that I forgot to see what really matters." In that moment, she understood that true success was not just about being recognized, but about being true to herself. Arthur smiled, pleased with her transformation. "And now, what are you going to do?" He challenged her to think about the future, and Diana felt a wave of possibilities. "I want to keep creating, I want to explore new ideas and allow myself to make mistakes in the process." She realized that her fresh start would be filled with new opportunities, and that each mistake would help her grow. In the days that followed, Diana's life began to change. The studio, once a space of insecurity, was now a refuge of creativity. With each new painting, she found herself freeing herself more and more from the need for approval. Her experiences had made her stronger, and the new perspective she had adopted helped her face other life challenges with resilience. She realized that the lessons learned in the exhibition were not just about art, but about life. Every failure became a springboard for growth. Her friendship with Arthur deepened, and they began to work together on new projects. Their mutual support strengthened not only Diana's creativity, but also Arthur's confidence in his own talents. They became a team, celebrating victories and learning from defeats. Diana also decided to share her journey with other artists. She started organizing meetups in her studio where she could talk about insecurities and challenges. The idea of creating a safe space for others to express themselves excited her. "We all have our fears," she would say during the meetings, "but it is our courage to face them that truly defines us." As time passed, Diana became an inspiring presence for many. The stories of overcoming that she shared resonated with those facing their own battles. She learned to listen to others' stories and offer the same support that Arthur had given her. Each interaction enriched her and connected her more deeply with the artistic community. Arthur's life also changed. He began to explore his own creativity, inspired by Diana's determination. Together, they supported each other in their projects and dreams. Arthur realized that his passion for art was not just about what he could create, but about how he could help others find themselves too. Their friendship became a pillar of strength in their lives. In the end, Diana not only overcame her insecurities and fears, she became a source of light for others. The journey taught her to embrace the complexity of life, to deal with failures, and to understand that true success goes beyond any recognition. It was about being authentic, about embracing who she truly was, and about how human connections could transform lives. When she looked at her paintings, Diana saw not just art, she saw the story of her life, filled with new beginnings, laughter, and lessons learned. And alongside Arthur, she knew she was ready to face whatever life brought her with the confidence and courage that now resided within her. Diana looked out the studio window, watching the leaves fall from the trees around. Time had passed since that night of the exhibition, and she still felt as if she were floating, carried by the tide of changes that her life had taken. Now, instead of feeling trapped in her insecurities, she breathed freedom and confidence. The paintings that adorned the studio walls were not just the fruits of her creativity. They were milestones of her journey, each telling a part of the story of her evolution. As the months went by, Diana not only dedicated herself to art, but also to her mission of helping others find their voices. The meetings she organized became a gathering place for artists of different ages and experiences. The room was always filled with laughter, stories of overcoming challenges, and tears of joy. Diana realized that by sharing her own struggles and achievements, she also allowed herself to be vulnerable, and this vulnerability created deep bonds among everyone who participated. Arthur, always by her side, began to flourish as well. He decided to explore new forms of art, mixing styles, and experimenting with techniques he had never tried before. Their friendship became a fundamental pillar in their lives, and together they discovered that art could be a reflection not only of their emotions, but also of their aspirations and dreams. The studio transformed into a vibrant space where ideas intertwined and creativity knew no bounds. One morning, while organizing her painting tools, Diana reflected on everything she had been through. She remembered her sleepless nights, the doubts that haunted her, and the feeling of inadequacy that accompanied her for so long. But now those memories were no longer weights on her shoulders. They were reminders that propelled her forward. She realized she had overcome her limitations and that each failure became an opportunity for growth. She thought about how she was not defined by what she couldn't achieve, but by what she was capable of accomplishing now. What once seemed a distant dream became a tangible reality. The praise she received from her peers and new friends encouraged her to keep going. But more than that, she realized that true success was not measured by awards or recognition, but by the ability to touch the lives of others. The impact her words and art had on the people around her was what truly mattered. Each story of perseverance she heard during the meetings made her feel more connected to the world. Diana also began to understand the importance of failure as part of the journey. Each mistake in her paintings became a lesson, a step towards something deeper. She freed herself from the need for perfection and instead embraced the beauty of imperfection. She reflected that this is how life is, full of ups and downs, and each of them teaches us something valuable. This new perspective helped her deal with challenges that once seemed insurmountable, such as tight deadlines and unexpected criticism. Over time, the wisdom gained from her journey manifested in her way of seeing the world. Diana began to value not only her achievements, but also the small joys of everyday life. A sunset, a conversation with a friend, or even the simple act of painting became meaningful moments she celebrated. This new way of living helped her find peace within herself, a harmony that once seemed unattainable. The impact of her friendship with Arthur also could not be underestimated. He had become more than a friend. He was a creative partner and a constant support. Together they explored new dimensions of art, and this deep connection transformed the way Diana saw the people around her. She began to realize that each person had their own battles, and this understanding led her to cultivate empathy and compassion. Their friendship extended beyond art. It was a mutual exchange of strength and inspiration. Looking toward the future, Diana felt a wave of excitement. She knew there would still be challenges ahead, but now she was equipped with the necessary tools to face them. The journey had transformed her into a stronger, more authentic, and more connected woman. She realized she didn't need to be perfect. She just needed to be true to herself. As the sun set, casting a golden glow over the studio, Diana smiled. She was not just living her life, she was creating it. Each color on the canvas, each story shared, each bond formed was part of a new narrative that was just beginning. And as the seasons changed, she knew that just like the leaves that fell and were reborn, she too was in constant transformation. Life was a beautiful work of art, and she was ready to paint it with all the colors available, celebrating every moment along the way. Diana watched the sunlight slowly fade, tinting the studio with a soft hue, that seemed to echo her emotions. Throughout her journey, she had learned to appreciate the little things. Each brushstroke on her canvases, each laugh shared with Arthur, and each story told at the artists' meetings became part of a greater whole. She had not only found herself in art, but also in the connections she had created. The studio was not just a physical space, it was a sanctuary of creativity and welcome. While organizing her paints, Diana reflected on her achievements. She thought with a smile that she had never imagined she could come this far. The insecurities that once paralyzed her were now just distant echoes. She realized that true success was not in exhibitions or positive reviews, but in the ability to touch the lives of those around her. Every artist who joined her brought a new perspective, and each shared story made her feel that her own journey was just a part of something much larger. Arthur interrupted her thoughts, asking if she remembered when it all began. He approached her with a nostalgic look in his eyes. He reminded her how hesitant and insecure she had been about her abilities. Diana laughed, recalling how she felt. It was as if she had been in a bubble, afraid to burst it. Now she felt like she was flying. He responded with admiration that this is what happens when you find your voice, and you used it to encourage others to do the same. You have no idea of the impact you made. Arthur's words resonated deeply within her. The impact she wanted to have on people's lives was becoming a reality. Every artist who crossed the studio door carried their own battles, and Diana felt honored to be part of this healing and discovery process. She realized that by supporting others, she was, in fact, strengthening herself. But life, like art, is full of unexpected twists. On a sunny morning, as she was preparing for yet another meeting, an email left her paralyzed. The subject was a proposal from a renowned gallery, inviting her for a solo exhibition. Her heart raced, but soon a shadow of doubt loomed over her mind. What would happen to the studio and to the artists who depended on her? The idea of stepping away from her community made her uneasy. "I can't let this pull me away from what I've built," she whispered to herself, struggling against the insecurity that still haunted her. Diana knew the opportunity was unique, but what mattered most to her? Individual accomplishments or the connection she had formed? It was in that moment that she decided. With renewed determination, she resolved that the exhibition would not be an end, but a new beginning. "I will take everyone with me," she thought, envisioning a way to include others in her journey. She began planning a section of the exhibition that would highlight the work of the artists who had become so important in her life. Each of them would have a chance to shine, and she would be the bridge connecting them to the outside world. Arthur, upon hearing the idea, smiled. "This is amazing, Diana. You always put yourself first, but now you are putting everyone around you first. That's what makes you who you are." Diana's decision not only solidified her own journey, but also strengthened the community she had built. Everyone came together to prepare the exhibition, sharing their stories and talents in ways they had never imagined. The studio, which had once been a space just for Diana, became a place of collaboration and mutual support. On the night of the exhibition, Diana was nervous, but her anxiety soon turned into joy as she saw all those familiar faces. The stories of overcoming and the achievements of each artist were celebrated, and she realized that the true meaning of success was there in that moment. It was about creating bonds, supporting one another, and celebrating art in its many forms. And this is how Diana understood that life is an ever-evolving work. With its flaws and new beginnings, she had discovered that true beauty lay in the shared journey. At the end of the night, as the lights dimmed and the last visitors said their goodbyes, Diana smiled. She was not just creating art, she was creating a legacy of love, friendship, and resilience. And above all, she had learned that the true art of life is knowing that even in the face of unexpected challenges, it is always possible to start anew and shine even brighter. Each of us is a unique color in the palette of life, she reflected as she observed the smiles and tears of joy around her. In the face of all that support and love, Diana made a request to the audience. Never underestimate the power of your voice. Each of you has the potential to impact the world in ways you cannot imagine. Share your stories, inspire each other, and above all, never stop believing in yourselves.